When I say the book of Revelation, what in it comes to mind for you? Think about that. The book of Revelation. There's typically two things that people think of, right? Even if they don't know anything else, they say the book of Revelation, for many people, it's a number. What number is it? That's right, 666. Or the mark of the, yeah, see, you all knew. That's what we're taking a look at today. That's the chapter that we are in. I think most of you know that I have a fascination with history and prophecy. Looking back and looking forward. And as the years pass, the more convinced I am that the end will be much like the beginning. History doesn't so much repeat itself as it does rhyme. I think the church age will end much as it began. And that means a tension between church and state that marked the early years will be reprised in the last days. Now, the contents of the book of Revelation were given to the Apostle John while he was a prisoner on the island prison of Patmos. He had been sent there during the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian in the late 80s of the first century. Domitian renewed a practice that previous emperors had employed, and that was to elevate them to the position of being a god. He claimed that he was the embodiment of the spirit of Rome. And that was no problem for pagans who already worshiped many gods and goddesses. We know it didn't mean anything to add one more. But the Christians couldn't, because the Ten Commandments made it very clear that there was to be the worship of only one God. Well, Domitian made Caesar worship a test of loyalty. This is at a period of time when the Roman Empire has really spread out now, and their dominion extends over many different people groups, and some of them weren't real happy being under the Roman yoke. Others did. They loved being part of the Roman Empire. It brought a peace to them and a prosperity they had never known before. But there were some areas, especially in the outlying regions of the empire, that were agitating, and sometimes there were insurrections and rebellion. And so Domitian used Caesar worship as a way to prove loyalty to the state and to the emperor. They were required to say Caesar is Lord. If they refused to declare him as Lord, they were condemned as subversive and punished. Well, of course, Christians couldn't say Caesar is Lord because their sacred creed, one of the things that they would actually confess publicly is Jesus is Lord. And so they couldn't say Caesar is Lord, and for that they were persecuted and fell under official opposition. John, a leader of the Christians, was arrested, and he was sent to the island of Patmos where they figured he couldn't do any damage there. And it's just stick him in prison over here. And isn't it interesting that God ends up giving him the visions that become the book of Revelation and have brought encouragement to the body of Christ for hundreds of years. And so, yeah, good luck with that, Roman Empire. Caesar worship grew over time. It became a formal ritual that went like this. Officials would make an announcement to a city, to a territory, a region, and they would say, on a particular date, we're going to require all the people in this area to come and to renew their loyalty to Caesar, to the empire. What they would do is they would set up a platform in the marketplace, the center of town, where everybody went. And they would then put an altar, a little altar on top of this platform with some hot coals on the top. And in front, right next to that would be an image of the emperor that would be set up. Now people would come up and they would walk up the stairs to this little dais. They would walk over to a table where there was some incense, pick up some incense, walk over to the altar, drop the incense on the hot coals, and as the scent of the incense rose, the smoke, they would look at the image and say, Caesar is Lord. That would be said loud enough that the officials would hear it. When they would walk down the stairs on the other side, they would go by a table where there was a scribe who would hand them a little scroll. It was called a libellus. And what it was an official document from the empire that said, you're loyal to the emperor. Now, here's what people did. They kept the libellus with them all the time. because it was a way to prove their what? Loyalty to the empire, to the emperor. And what they would do is when they would go to the marketplace, many merchants would require to see the libellus before they would sell you anything. If you wanted to get a service from the government, from the civil officials, maybe you needed them to do something for you, you had to show your libellus. Otherwise, they would say, well, you're not loyal to the empire. We're not going to do anything for you. And so this became a test of loyalty to the empire. Well, of course, that sorted the Christians out because they couldn't say Caesar is Lord. They had no libellus. And as a result, they were losing their jobs, they were losing their homes, and they were being marginalized in society. In some places, they were being arrested and ultimately executed. In chapter 13 of Revelation, John has a vision of how the seed of Caesar worship in his day will bloom into the full flower of worship and devotion to the Antichrist in the end times. Now, all of chapter 13 we'll cover on Wednesday, all of it. We're going to pick it up at verse 16 today after what we just read. In verses 1 through 10, John has a vision of the rise of this character that we call the Antichrist. And then in verses 11 through 18 is a vision. The vision moves over to another character who comes to be known as the false prophet. While the Antichrist will dominate the political, military, and economic realms, the false prophet assists the Antichrist's rise to power in the religious sphere. You see, the Antichrist isn't interested in just being a political figure. His ambition is to be God. The false prophet is his religious frontman that assists his rise to power. Both of these guys are imbued with supernatural power by Satan to work miraculous deeds in the view of people, which seems to kind of reinforce the idea that they are more than human. Again, we'll get into all of this on Wednesday night. Look at verse 16 as we pick it up where we left off. So he, that is the false prophet who he's just been referring to, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So John clarifies who is marked. All, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free and the slave, the ruled and their rulers, commoners, elites, everyone. No sector of society is excluded. The Antichrist is going after complete hegemony. Now understand why he's doing this. It's establishing his control. There's a reason he wants that control. It has ever been Satan's desire to be like God. In fact, Isaiah chapter 14 charts his fall. Listen to these words as the prophet is speaking about Satan. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations? For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Interesting phrase there when he says, I will sit on the mount of the congregation in the farthest sides of the north. That's what is that about? Many scholars, theologians, believe that that is the position God sits when he officially receives worship in heaven. It's where all of the angels gather to worship him. And what does Lucifer say? I'm going to sit there. I'm going to be like, they're all going to worship me. Well, here in chapter 13 of Revelation, John has a vision of an end times satanic parody of God. Satan, Antichrist, and false prophet form an unholy trinity that parrots the holy trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And just as God in chapter 7 sealed his servants, those that were loyal to him, remember, with a seal? So here, the Antichrist seals his servants, marks his servants, those that are loyal to him. In imitation of God's sovereignty, Satan is ambitious for control. And here is yet another layer of God's grace being peeled back during the tribulation. Oh my goodness, think of this. Imagine what it would be like on planet Earth right now if Satan was free to do what he wanted. If you read the book of Job, remember Job? Job goes to God. God says, have you considered my servant Job? How he loves me? And what is Satan's accusation? Oh man, it's just because you do so much for him. And God says, no, it's because he loves me, because he's loyal to me. And Satan says, give him to me and I'll show you what he'll do. Remember that? Why? Because God's restraining him. And God says, okay, he gives him permission. And then we see what happens. That'd be happening to you right now if God was not holding back Satan. That's what would be happening to us. Why? Because we bear the image of God and he hates God. He would be doing everything he could to destroy us. It's God's grace that holds back the power of Satan. But what is the tribulation? The tribulation is God. Remember we saw this 2 weeks ago. The tribulation is God giving the world what it wants. A world without him. And the judgments are God pulling back a layer of his grace and the world seeing what a world without him is like. He peels back another layer. Another judgment comes. He peels back another. Well, here is God peeling back another layer of his grace. He's letting the world have what it wants. And you know what it gets? The Antichrist and the false prophet. So empowered by Satan, they move to unite the world under a system that they control. And how they do that is described here. People are allowed access to the marketplace, to the economic realm, only if they are somehow marked. And here we get into another controversy that the commentators are all over on, and that's what is the mark? What is it? Bottom line, we don't know. I know, but I can't tell you. Now, we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. But one day, people will. Now, some think that it's an actual physical mark. Others say, no, it's an idea. It's not something physical. It's an idea, or it's an ideology, a mindset, if you will. Because of the way that it's described, I think there's reason to regard it as something that can be seen. Look with me. It says here that the false prophet causes people, let's work through this real slowly, he says, to receive. Now, that actually means to endow or to impart something. It was used of writing on something. To receive a mark. That word refers to an impression that's left by pressing or carving. Like when a seal is pressed into wax or branding something on their right hand or on their forehead. If the mark is just an idea, why mention body parts? And he says, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark. How would an idea or an opinion have any commercial effect? It seems the language is making it clear that we're to understand this as something, it's a mark. It's something that's seen. Now, we'll get to what the mark may be in a minute. For now, we need to consider what's the consequence of receiving the mark? Well, that's spelled out for us in the next chapter. Look at chapter 14, verse 9. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night who worship the image and his beast, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Please understand, the wording here is very clear. It's said twice. Receiving the mark and worshiping the Antichrist go together. They're the same thing. People don't do one or the other. They do both. No one is going to be marked accidentally. If you receive the mark, it's because you're saying, in saying, I want it, you're saying, I accept the Antichrist. I welcome, I'm part of his, I'm loyal to him. It's like when we confess Christ, when we come into faith in Christ, you're doing the same thing to Antichrist when you receive this mark. And all the marked are all in on their devotion to the Antichrist. He becomes their God. As ancient devotees of false gods like Baal or Asherah or Molech often had a tattoo of their symbol, the symbol of that god, these will brand themselves with the logo of the Antichrist. Now, what's in view in all of this isn't either physical or spiritual, it's both. The mark is the outward evidence of an internal identity that's aligned with the Antichrist in rebellion against God. It's a 21st century of Caesar worship. What did they receive when they would say Caesar is Lord? What did they get? A libellus. These people, when they say Antichrist is Lord, what do they get? They're libellus. They get this little mark that somehow identifies them, and now they're able to participate just like the first. Do you see why I say the end's going to be like the beginning? History doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. Now, they're not going to say Antichrist is Lord, because they're not going to call him Antichrist. They're going to, whatever his name is, they're going to identify him by that name, whatever it is. What is his name? We don't know. Now, the mark itself is some identifying feature that can be seen and grants access to the marketplace. What the mark will be, we can't say, but I think there are trends at play today that give us clues. This word mark in Greek is charagma, and it means to mark something, as I said, by pressing or carving, etching. It's the action of a seal that's pressed into the wax to show ownership. It's carving your initials in something. Again, identify, you see what you're doing? You're carving your initials into it. You're marking it as yours or that you were there. It was the word that was used in ancient manuscripts to speak of the branding of slaves, that they're owned by this master. It was the distinctive tattoo that members of a religious group would take. What John describes may be a tattoo that people take that identifies them as loyal followers of the Antichrist. Now listen, consider Western society's acceptance of tattoos. When I was growing up, there was a stigma that was attached to tattoos. They were limited to toughs, bikers, and sailors. Right? How many of you can relate to that? You remember that? Yeah. Not the case today. Tattoos are everywhere. We were just in Cancun. We were out by the pool a lot. And everybody has tattoos. I felt kind of odd. Everybody had tattoos, didn't matter what age. There's tattoos everywhere. There's grandmas with sleeves on. Like, good grief, you're 80 years old and she's got color all up and down her arm. Yeah. Facial tattoos are becoming more and more accepted, more and more prevalent. Interesting. How society in just one generation has gone from tattoos are really just for a kind of a fringe group of society to being fashion models. Grandmothers have tattoos. They're just everywhere. Now, please understand, the mark of the beast isn't going to be, a butterfly or some Polynesian design. But the trend that makes tattoos commonplace, it set the stage for the mark. You see? There's this cultural acceptance just across the board now for tattoos. Now, that's the cultural trend that may align with the mark, but consider some of the economic and technological trends. Things are rapidly moving in our society to a cashless society. When was the last time you paid cash for something? Most of our transactions are done electronically now, aren't they? Debit cards, credit cards, Apple Pay, Shopify. You can do virtually all your shopping online these days, including groceries. Our neighbor had all of his groceries delivered yesterday. You could really go through life now, if you wanted to, never using cash anymore. It's all done electronically. The problem with online transactions, though, is identity theft. It's a huge problem. And so banks are working on extra security measures. And so we used to be a password, a PIN, a PIN number, right? But now they're coming up with two-step verification. You've got to use another app, another app? Good grief, I got too many apps as it is. What do you mean I need another app? What's going on? Credit cards? Now you have to turn it over, and what's the 3-digit number on there? And the problem is that all of this slows stuff down. The banking industry knows it slows stuff down. And yeah, there's something you have to remember. So honestly, show of hands, how many of you have had to do this? You've been online, you're doing some shopping, you're filling out your credit card information, and it gets to the point where it wants that 3-digit number, right? And you're, oh man, you have to go out and get your wallet out and pull the card. How many of you, raise your hand, how many of you have to see? This is what I'm saying? You just added 24 more seconds to your work. Oh, my goodness, I could have been doing something else. So the problem is, and of course, you got to remember those numbers too. You have to remember I got to remember my password. You want me to have a different password for every site? Whew. You have a password manager, but you need a password to get into your password manager. And the banks know this is slowing things down, and we love convenience, don't we? And so what's the solution? Well, attach your ID to you. You become your identity, you see? And so how can we do that? Well, in previous years, when we've taught through Revelation, we've talked about the prevalence of microchips and how they're actually injecting microchips now into people. They've gotten to the point where they have microchips the size of the head of a pin that contains lots and lots of information, and they can be read from a near-field reader. And there have, in fact, been some governments and some companies that have used implanted chips, and you can guess where they put it. They put it in the right hand. They put it right in here, the meat of the hand. And they'll inject it in there, and now there are certain places in the company you can only go if you have the proper verification. There were even some nightclubs in Europe that were using that technology so that you didn't have to bring a wallet or a purse anymore. You could just get it implanted, and you could go, if you were a member, you could go into other areas. They would simply scan you. And that's possible. Could be a planted chip. The problem is you don't see that, right? You could still have it recognized by your reader. But there's another technology that has been developed just over the last couple of years, and we've all heard about it now, AI. Artificial intelligence. AI is really good at facial recognition. Really good. And companies and banks are now experimenting with facial recognition. When we got back from Cancun, we landed in LAX, and because we're coming from Mexico, we had to go through border control. Now, I'm a member of Global Entry. I do some international travel, and it just makes it a lot quicker to get through immigration by having global entry. And it used to be that you would take your passport and you would put it on the screen, and then there was a camera up here that would match the picture on your passport to the picture up here, and if they matched, they would push you, they would just let you go through. You didn't have to stand in line. But now, you don't even have to put your passport. Listen, you walk up to the thing, and you don't even press a button, you just walk up. It reads you. The minute you stop, it reads you, and it tells you you can go. Because the computers at immigration are connected to the copy of your passport they already have on file, and it did it that quick. And we were through the border control. Could have done it without even stopping. Facial recognition, AI. And banks are starting to experiment with this technology in different test markets around the country, where you walk up to the ATM, and it scans your face, and you have access to your account. You become your ID. It won't be long before stores are doing that as well. Tied right into your bank account. But how is this the mark? Well, the idea is this: moving to a cashless society where you become your ID, your face. You step up, the screen matches, but you have to show, if you want to access that system, you have to show that you're loyal to the system, You've got to be part of the system. And how do we do that? Well, you show your mark. Most people will have it on their hands because they have hands, but what about the people that don't have a hand? Well, put it on the one thing you have to have, your head. You don't got a head. Sucks to be you. We wonder what could move so many people, because this is going to be the world. Remember, it's the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the slave and the free. It's everyone. What could move so many, literally millions and millions of people to buy into this system? What could possibly do it? We go back to the beginning. Satan told Eve, go with my plan, go my way, and you will be like God. And she fell for it. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul says that the Antichrist will rise, and it says that God will send strong delusion upon the world that they should believe the lie. Not a lie, the lie. What's the lie? It's the first lie. You'll be like. The Antichrist will be given supernatural power by Satan to deceive the world. He will say, I have evolved. I have stepped into the next phase of human evolution that is godlike. Let me prove it. And he performs miracles that people see. And then he will say, if you want to join me in this evolutionary step into our next phase as what it means to be human, join my system. And by the way, if you don't, you're holding us back. We got to get rid of you. I've documented all of this in a study called The Lie. I did it years ago, updated it a few years ago. It's online. We put a fresh link to it on the very front page of our website. I would encourage you, if you haven't heard of this, go home and listen to the study. It's a very convincing study on this entire subject. It's called The Lie. You'll see the link there on the front page. Maybe get a chance, listen to it this afternoon or sometime this week. Okay, verse 17. No one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. That's the same thing 3 different ways. It's not 3 different things. It's the same thing 3 different ways. If I say, hey, let's go in my vehicle, my car, my Ford, it's the Bronco, okay? It's one thing. And that's the idea here. This is one thing stated 3 different ways. Whatever form the mark takes, the point is it's identifying with Antichrist. It might be his name spelled out. It might be a symbol or a logo that refers to him. Verse 18. This is an important verse for us this morning. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Now, modern languages use different symbols for their numbers and their letters. The ancient languages had their letters pull double duty. So their letters were also numbers. A, for instance, would be 1, B, 2, J, 10. You get it, right? And so everyone's name had an equivalent number. And sometimes people would take their nickname from the numerical value of their name. We saw this in some graffiti that was found in the ruins of Pompeii. Somebody had written on a wall, I love her whose name is 545. So people would actually use that as it was kind of code. It was a way to kind of hide things and to have a nickname. So does verse 18 tell us who the Antichrist is? Well, Martin Luther said it was the Pope. And the Pope returned the favor and said it was Martin Luther. And of course, as you know, all kinds of people have been proposed as being the Antichrist. Napoleon and Hitler and Stalin have all been proposed. But hold on, to calculate who the Antichrist is, we would need to convert their name into Greek or Hebrew. John says, look at what he says, verse 18. Here is wisdom. Here. That is in what he says next. Okay? And that is this. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. But such understanding only comes by there being someone who's done what the previous verses said about him. And that won't happen till the tribulation. Please hear me, Christians, my brothers and sisters. Stop trying to figure out who the Antichrist is. No one will know. As Paul says in 2 Thessalonians 2, the Antichrist will not be revealed until the church has been raptured, until we're out of here. Don't try to figure out who the Antichrist is. If you figure out who the Antichrist is, you're in the tribulation. Someone will arise. We know this one. Someone will arise, and people will be able to know when he does that it's him. Why? Because his name will somehow connect to 666. Now, it says calculate the number of his name. There's some kind of figuring that's going to go on here, but we can't do that now because we don't have someone that fulfills what we're looking at here. So here's wisdom. Stop it. Oh, Pastor, I thought it was this person. I was told by this reliable Bible teacher that it's this person or it's that person. If they're telling you that, they're not a reliable Bible teacher. This Antichrist will install a new world order in which no one can buy or sell without an oath of loyalty to and worship of him. Now, listen, it may be that the world will be in such overt rebellion during the tribulation, and the Antichrist will so twist Scripture that the mark is literally 666. Interesting to me how over the last 20 years, how many musicians, artists, authors have embraced the number 666. It's on album covers. There was a rapper a little while ago that came out with shoes that had 666 on them. There are people today that are tattooing 666 on their foreheads. How perverse is that? When people know this number is evil and they say, yes, they take pride in it. Can you see the world coming to a place where they're so deceived by the Antichrist, they actually take that number? That's how deceived the world will be, how in rebellion against God it is. And it may very well be simply the number itself, as he lays claim to that. That's the lie that the Antichrist will offer the last humans. Verse 18, it may be a mystery to us. It's not going to be for those who are alive when the Antichrist and false prophet weave their deceitful web. I want to end with this. Think of how many people will not be raptured and will find themselves in the tribulation and will see these things happening and realize the things that you talked about with them, you talked to them about, are true. We've already seen that many will come to faith during the tribulation. Many. It's going to be a huge number that will be. Many will be deceived, but there will be this great wave that come out during the tribulation. That Bible that's in your lap right now, you're not taking it with you. When you get raptured, it's staying behind. The world's going to need them. Have you been telling people about all of this and they look at you and they go, oh, come on. That's science fiction. What are you talking? It's crazy talk. You know what? You might be here and saying that right now. You got dragged to church today. You heard free donuts and you said, I'm in. And you're looking at me and you're going, that dude's whack. And you're hearing it. And the fact is, the day's coming, very likely, you're going to see it. people are going to disappear, and you're going to like, what? Oh my goodness, maybe they were right. Maybe they were right. But I don't know, there's this guy over here, and he's saying amazing things, and he's calling down fire from heaven, and he's doing amazing things. Good grief, he was dead, and he came back to life. Well, oh my goodness, and he's got amazing solutions to world problems. And all my friends and people that I know, they're all thinking this guy is the cat's meow. That's the Messiah. But wait a minute, those Christians, they're gone, and where's that Bible? And you pick it up. Where were we that Sunday? Oh, that's right, Revelation 13, I think, and you read the words. And you'll remember this moment. Or you've got friends and family that you've been talking to, and they just blow you off, and you're gone, and they're going to pick up that Bible, and they're going to read this. And they're going to realize it's all true. And the message has been sent. You got to receive this mark to identify with the Antichrist system, or we're going to have to get rid of you because you're holding back human evolution. I need to plead with you right now. I know this sounds crazy. I know it does. But you know, that's what the Nazis told the Germans, and why they needed to get rid of the Jews and the Poles and the Slavs and all of the handicapped people and the mentally retarded people, why they needed to get rid of them, because they were holding back the evolution of the German race. Did you know that? It's already happened. And some 6 million people were put to death so that the Aryan race could be perfected. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It's going to happen again. Now is the day of salvation. Now. Don't put it off. Don't wait for the movie. Read the book. We have the privilege of being able to see and understand these things before they happen and to take action now. Don't wait till then. If you're holding back, don't hold back any longer. Put your faith in Christ today.